Any comment from the public?
I'd like to make a comment. The GFOA also says, Casella says, between 5 and 15%, but also says no less than 1 month to 2 months. So if you figure that out, that's like between 8.3 to about 16.7% range. I checked, my recommendation is to change this between 10 to 20%. I checked with other communities, and City of Calabasas, about 2 years ago, a similar item was brought to them. And they brought up the issues that the reasons that they're recommended that the city come up with a reserve is because the potential unforeseen decreases in the amount of revenue from taxes, property taxes, because of recession, the possible future passive measures such as Proposition 218, which could restrict local governments from raising taxes, fees, without voter approval, the need to be able to cover cash flows, possible financial strains resulting from natural disasters, softening of local economies, unexpected impacts from state actions, i.e. the VLF backfill, ERAF shift, the desire to maintain credit worthiness, and to pay for unforeseen credit capital needs. The city of Calabasas is a pretty wealthy city down south, but they actually had a reserve of 115% of the general fund. So that means like the city of Dixon, we would have like 118 million in reserves. But their staff's opinion was to make the reserve not less than 40% for the current fiscal years. So that's significantly greater than what's being proposed to our city. About a year or two before that, the city of Pittsburgh, they brought up a similar issue. And they a survey was done for about 51 communities. And about half of them had a reserve of 20% or greater. Several of the cities had a reserve of, quote, greater than 50% that they had approved. Some other cities, I'll give you an example. Pleasant Hill, their city requires them to maintain a reserve of about 40%. San Ramon, about 50%. They had a reserve of about 21 million. Brentwood reserved 30% of the annual general fund appropriation. And even then in the Vancouver Reporter, Sacramento Bee, there was an article a couple of weeks ago, reserves in new cities. Elk Grove targets its contingency reserves at 15 to 20%. Rancho Cordova places the reserves at a minimum of 20%. So I believe because of the economy and everything else, and it would also act as a governor at good times, that the city should strive to maintain a reserve of no less than 10%, probably 10 to 20%. Would help us out when we do have these economic downturns, and yet going down to 5% is just too low. That's less than a month's worth of operating expenses. So my recommendation is to change it from 10 to 20%. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public?